In the darkest night of the Western Roman Empire, a lone legion stands against an unstoppable enemy. The forest trembles with thousands of warriors, and one commander knows this might be the last battle of Rome. A young soldier writes to his mother, unaware that the fortress he defends may never see the dawn. Tonight, courage will face chaos, and history will remember their names. In the fading days of the Western Roman Empire, when its power was crumbling and its borders were under constant attack, a small Roman legion stood guard on a lonely frontier fortress. It was the 5th century. The empire that had once ruled the known world was slowly collapsing. Across the northern forests, powerful barbarian tribes were gathering, tribes that no longer feared Rome. Among them were the fierce warriors of the Goths, who had already destroyed cities and shattered Roman armies. Yet inside a lonely stone fortress near the frontier, a few hundred Roman soldiers still believed in something that was already fading into history. They believed in Rome. The veteran. Commander the legion was commanded by a veteran officer named Marcus Valerius, a soldier who had spent nearly 30 years defending the empire. He had fought in many wars under the legendary Roman general Flavius Aetius, the man many called the last defender of Rome. Marcus had seen cities burn. He had watched entire legions vanish in battle. But this fortress felt different. The walls were old, supplies were low, and the empire they served no longer sent reinforcements. Still, every morning the Roman banner was raised above the fortress gate, and every soldier saluted it. Because to them, Rome was more than an empire. It was their home. A soldier's letter. One cold evening, as the wind howled through the mountains, a young soldier named Lucius sat beside a torch writing a letter. It was for his mother in southern Italy. "Mother," he wrote, "do not worry about me. The fortress is strong, and our commander says Rome still stands. When my service ends, I will come home." But Lucius paused. Deep down, he knew the truth. Rome was dying, and many soldiers here would never see their homes again. Marcus walked past him and noticed the letter. "Writing to your family?" the commander asked quietly. Lucius nodded. Marcus looked toward the dark forest beyond the walls. "Good," he said softly. "Write while you still can." The shadow in the forest. That same night, the watchtowers reported movement. Torches. Hundreds of them. From the hills surrounding the fortress, thousands of barbarian warriors were gathering. The Goths had come. Their leader, a powerful war chief named Theodoric the Great, had been marching across Roman lands for weeks. Cities had already fallen, villages burned. Now the Goth army had reached this lonely Roman stronghold. Inside the fortress, the soldiers understood the truth immediately. They were surrounded. The speech. Before the battle, Marcus gathered his men in the courtyard. The cold wind blew across the fortress walls as hundreds of tired soldiers stood silently before their commander. Marcus looked at their faces, old veterans, young recruits, farmers, sons, men who had given their lives to an empire that might already be gone. For a moment, Marcus said nothing, then he spoke. "Soldiers of Rome, tonight we stand alone." No one moved. "The empire may fall," he continued. "Cities may burn, kings may betray us." He pointed toward the dark forest outside the walls. "But tonight, those men out there will learn something." His voice grew stronger. "Rome does not die easily." The soldiers raised their shields and struck them with their swords. The sound echoed through the fortress like thunder. The attack begins. Just before midnight, the horns of the Gothic army echoed through the valley. Thousands of warriors surged forward toward the fortress walls. Arrows rained through the sky. Roman archers answered from the towers. Fire lit the battlefield. The Goths carried ladders, axes, and burning torches. They crashed against the gates like a storm. Inside the fortress, the Roman soldiers fought like men who knew this battle might be their last. Lucius stood beside Marcus on the wall. "Commander," he said nervously. "There are too many of them." Marcus simply replied, "There always are." The fall of the gate. After hours of fighting, the massive wooden gate finally shattered. The Goth warriors flooded into the fortress courtyard. The battle turned into chaos. Steel clashed, torches burned, men screamed in the darkness. Marcus fought. At the center of the courtyard, his armor stained with blood and ash. Even as the enemy poured in, the Roman soldiers refused to break formation. They fought shoulder to shoulder, like a wall, like Rome itself. The last stand by dawn. Only a handful of Roman soldiers were still standing. The fortress was burning. The courtyard was filled with fallen warriors. Lucius lay wounded beside the broken gate, clutching the letter he had written the night before. Marcus stood above him, still holding his sword. The Gothic warriors surrounded them. Their leader stepped forward slowly. For a moment, the battlefield became silent. The Gothic chief looked at Marcus with respect. "You fought well, Roman," he said. Marcus looked around, at the ruined fortress, at his fallen soldiers. Then he answered quietly, "We always did." The memory of Rome. The fortress fell that morning. The barbarian army moved on. But the story of the last Roman legion spread across the lands of Europe. Even the enemies of Rome remembered their courage, because empires may fall, cities may burn, but sometimes the courage of a few soldiers becomes stronger than history itself. And on that cold frontier night in the 5th century, Rome did not die quietly. It fought until the very end. Dawn slowly rose over the ruined fortress. Smoke drifted through the broken walls, and the cold wind carried the smell of fire and iron. What had once been a proud Roman outpost of the Western Roman Empire now lay in silence. The battle was over. Most of the Roman soldiers had fallen during the night. Their shields lay scattered across the courtyard, and the Roman eagle banner had collapsed beside the burning gate. Among the survivors was the wounded young soldier Lucius. He struggled to breathe as the first light of morning touched the battlefield. The enemy's respect. The victorious warriors of the Goths walked carefully through the fortress, searching for survivors. Their king, Theodoric the Great, entered the courtyard slowly. He had expected an easy victory, but what he had witnessed during the night surprised even him. A few hundred Roman soldiers had held off thousands of warriors for hours. Theodoric stopped beside the fallen body of Marcus, Valerius, the Roman commander. Marcus still held his sword. Even in death, his hand refused to let go. The Gothic king looked down at the warrior silently. Then he spoke to his men. "Leave him." The soldiers around him were confused. "He died." "As a warrior," Theodoric said, "let him keep his sword." Even enemies could recognize courage. A letter that survived. As the Goth warriors searched the ruins, one soldier found something near the broken gate. A small piece of parchment. It was Lucius's letter. The young Roman soldier was still alive, barely conscious. The Gothic warrior picked up the letter and handed it to his king. Theodoric read the words written in trembling ink. "Mother, do not worry about me. Rome still stands." For a moment the king said nothing. He slowly folded the letter. Then he looked down at Lucius, who was trying to speak. The last Roman words. Lucius's voice was weak. "Did we hold the gate?" Theodoric knelt beside him. "Yes," the king said quietly. "For a long time." "You did." Lucius closed his eyes. A faint smile appeared on his face. That was enough for him. Because for one night, against impossible odds, the soldiers of Rome had held their ground. The end of an age. Years later, the empire those soldiers fought for would finally collapse. In the year 476, the last Roman emperor of the West, Romulus Augustulus, would be removed from power. The mighty Roman Empire that had ruled for centuries would disappear from history. But stories like the last stand of Marcus and his legion did not disappear. Travelers, soldiers, and historians continued to tell the tale. They spoke of a fortress where a handful of Roman soldiers fought until the very end, not for gold, not for glory, but for something greater. For Rome. A story, remembered long after the empire had fallen. People still remembered the courage of those last defenders. Even the enemies of Rome respected them. Because history is not only written by kings and emperors, sometimes it is written by ordinary soldiers who refuse to surrender. And on that final night of the Roman frontier, the empire may have been dying, but the spirit of Rome was still alive. The ruined fortress remained silent after the battle. Smoke still rose from the broken towers, and the once proud banner of the Western Roman Empire lay torn in the ashes. The army of the Goths prepared to march again. For them, this fortress was only one small victory in a long campaign across the lands that had once belonged to Rome. But for the few survivors, the night would never be forgotten. The burial of a Roman. Before leaving the fortress, the Gothic king Theodoric the Great gave an unusual order: bury the Roman commander. His warriors were surprised. Romans had been their enemies for generations. Many Gothic tribes had lost families, lands, and cities to Roman armies. Yet Theodoric had watched the battle with his own eyes. He had seen the Roman commander Marcus Valerius fighting even after the gate had fallen. So the Goth warriors dug a grave beside the fortress wall. They placed Marcus there with his armor, shield, and sword. It was the kind of burial given to a warrior, not an enemy, but a soldier worthy of respect. A journey south. The young Roman soldier. Lucius survived the battle. Weak and wounded, he was taken with the marching Gothic army as they moved south through the old Roman roads. During the journey, he held tightly to the small letter he had written to his mother. Rome was still hundreds of miles away, but something inside him kept him alive. Hope. Weeks later, Lucius was released near the Italian countryside. The Gothic king had given him his freedom. "Go home," Theodoric told him. "Tell your people how your soldiers fought, a world that had changed." When Lucius finally reached Italy, he saw something that broke his heart. The world he had known was gone. Roman cities were poorer. The great roads were cracked and empty. The legions that once protected the empire had disappeared. And, in the year 476, the final emperor of the West, Romulus Augustulus, was removed from power. For the first time in centuries, Rome no longer ruled the West. The empire had fallen, the story that survived. But Lucius never forgot the fortress. He told people about that final night, about the Roman soldiers who had stood against thousands, about the commander Marcus who refused to surrender. At night, in taverns and marketplaces, travelers listened as he described the battle. The clash of swords, the fire on the walls, the moment when the Roman soldiers raised their shields together for the last time. And every time Lucius told the story, he ended it the same way. He would say quietly, "Rome did not fall because her soldiers were weak." He would pause. Then he would finish the story. "Rome fell because time itself defeated her." The echo of an empire centuries later, historians would still study the fall of the Roman Empire. They would speak of invasions, politics, corruption, and wars. But beyond the politics and kings, there were thousands of forgotten soldiers like Marcus and Lucius. Men who stood on cold frontiers. Men who fought battles that history almost forgot. And on one lonely night in the 5th century, a small Roman legion proved something important. Empires may collapse. Borders may change. But courage, loyalty, and sacrifice can echo through history forever.